I got a few things I want to start with. I guess I better introduce I'm Terry Murphy. I'm the acting mayor for the next 6 weeks. This is part of my committee. All right. So a couple of things I want to do. I've tried to schedule it so that we would be meeting on Thursdays, not every Thursday, but so that Thursday would be the night to meet. I've done that to do two things. Number one, to kind of have a regular schedule. And number two, so that we don't have conflicts with city council, school committee as much as possible, so that they can be here as well if they want. Okay? So the next one would be 3 weeks from today, October 14th. Same time, more than likely, chances are we're going to be here just because we try to make sure we don't have too many things going into the schools if we don't have to. So more than likely it's going to be here. I am going to try to get some microphones so that we'll be able to be doing that. Be able to have microphones at each of the tables rather than having one, and even the one today, I'm going to get the one because the person that has it wasn't around to give it to me. So that's number two. So October 14th, 3 weeks from today, we'll go from there. Most important, I want it, and your committee members, just come on, you'll be sitting at the table. So if you're not a committee member, you're welcome to sit on the chairs right there, that's fine. But if you are in one of the committees, please come to the table. I want to thank those people that volunteered. I interviewed most of you, if not all of you. I appreciated your enthusiasm. I appreciated your understanding that it's important that we do this process correctly, that we do this process together, that we do this process with respect. We're not always going to have unanimous agreement, but we need to understand what the other concerns are. So I want to emphasize that, and I want to thank all of you that volunteered. Third, I've invited both mayoral candidates to attend. I heard from both right now, but I do want to introduce Councilor Mike Sullivan, who has told me he would be here, and he is. I'm expecting candidate Josh Garcia also to come, but as of right now, obviously he's not. But so I did want to, and I wanted to invite them for two things. Number one of them should be leading this process. And I am very strongly encouraging that they truly lead the process. Be involved from the get-go, all the way through the process, until the completion of the process. A challenge for you, Mike. I don't think it's going to be a major challenge, but that's a challenge. Let's make sure we do it right. So, working groups. As I met with people, originally we talked about having a committee. As I met with people and discussed these things, I came to the conclusion there's different expertise that each of you has, and specific extra desires that each of you has. So, what I have gone over and tried to discuss and tried to get clear is that we have different working groups, probably between 5 and 8 people. That might meet once a month for a couple of hours just to go over where we are and what the recommendations would be to the full 13-member voting block. And there are 13 members that will vote. And I've been told I have to be one of those for a while. One of those working groups is academic, extracurricular, family involvement, counseling, the kind of things that have classroom direct impact and extracurricular activities once school is out. And I know a number of you have really advocated for certain things, and I know you want to be on some of those. Second one is finance. If I had to look at where we made a mistake several years ago, we didn't look at the financial picture. We need to make sure city's resources. There's going to be changes over the next year, year and a half. Hopefully good changes. Hopefully we're looking better financially. But we need to be aware of what those changes are and how they're going to impact our ability to bond for the school and pay for it without going back for a taxpayer override. So I'm really encouraging. I know some of you are very well attuned to financial issues, and I really want you to keep a fine eye on what's going on there. The third thing is design. I know we've got people that have experience on not only the actual design of schools, but working with designers in a variety of capacities. So I'm encouraging you to have that experience to be part of that, because as we come up with our academic desires, we also need to design a building that effectively meets those desires and is within our financial capacity. So as I talk to you, I kept saying I see the circle. Here's the circle of academics. Here's the circle of construction, design. Here's the circle of finance. Eventually, we got to be able to go through that circle smoothly. We got to get a better educational experience. We got to have a nice, effective design, and we got to be able to do it within our financial capacities. I will say, I was asked today, I thought I was being asked to get this all set up in Zoom for tonight, and I said, no, I can't do it. But we are going to do both in person and Zoom for future. I just couldn't pull it off for tonight. So that will be something in the future people can observe. And this is being recorded. It will be on channel 12 or 15?
12.
Channel 12. Do you have an idea when the first time?
Probably by tomorrow night.
Okay. So we are televising it. We are recording it, so people will have a chance to see it. All right. Lastly, before I ask these people who have offered their services to introduce themselves, as I said, success to me will be the completion of the projects through respectful discussion and in disagreement. The ability to find the need to balance compromise while maintaining excellence, and the need to unite the communities. Let's make this a community project that people want to have and want to do it the right way and feel comfortable with how we're doing it. If you do that, you got a home run. And that ultimately would be the goal. So, we'll start with Anthony introducing himself, and then I'm just going to have you go around this way, and then we'll come back around this way. I would like you, if you don't mind, you've got to get to know each other. Some of you know each other, some of you don't. So, at the end of the day, after we've introduced each other, make sure you kind of get to know each other a little bit more. It's a lot easier working with people that you know and you feel comfortable with than people that you feel alienated. And there's a lot of people that say, I'm an alien. Let's go from there. Anthony, you got it.
Anthony Soto, lifelong Holyoker, newly appointed superintendent as of July 1st, and been working in Holyoke for the last, Holyoke Public Schools for the last 5.5 years.
Hi, I'm Sal Panada. I'm a 30-year middle school educator. The last 20 or so as administrator. I'm the current principal of STEM Academy, the only real middle school in Holyoke. I've been a resident of Holyoke since 1995, and both my kids graduated from Holyoke High in the last 3 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Deborah Vega. I am a small business owner here in Holyoke. Always Vega Yoga Mogul, serving the community for the last 13 years. I'm also a dance educator, and I have taught dance not only in higher ed, but also at private high school as well. And then I have a son who is a second grader in the Holyoke Public Schools currently. His name is Odin, and he's in the dual language program at Union White School.
Hi, I'm Efrain Martinez. I was president of Holyoke since 1982. I am teacher, administrator in Holyoke and Springfield, administrator in Philadelphia and Kendall, New York. Recently retired. I'm a member of the community, as I said, parent of 2 alumni, parent of a teacher at Metcalf, and most importantly, the grandfather of the cutest first grader in Ghana.
Hi, hello, my name is Lori Belanter. I'm the city's chief procurement officer.
Aaron, didn't expect that to be so quick.
Yeah, sorry, my dad's trying to pick up my child from soccer practice. You know how that can go. Erin Brunel, I am a lifelong Hoyoker, and I am on the school board member at large, representing the citizens of Hoyoke in that capacity. Both of my kids attend Hoyoke Public Schools, and they also go to the dual language program, but they're at Metcalf, and I look forward to participating in this process.
Hi, Jackie Casheen. I work in the Hoyoke Public Schools, live in Holyoke, graduated from Hoyoke Public Schools. I have a junior at Hoyoke High School. Looking forward to building the middle school experience for our kids.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm Whitney Anderson. I work for the Hoyoke Public Schools as well. I'm the maintenance administrator. And my 2 sons are graduates from the Hoyoke schools. I grew up in Springfield and have been here for 40 years. Look forward to this process and sticking with it and being a quiet contributor, but call upon when necessary. Thank you.
I'm Raina Lorenzi. I work for the state auditor's office. I'm a senior auditor there. I've been there for the last 4 years. Before that, I worked for DOR as a tax examiner. I grew up in Holyoke with the Holyoke school system, have 2 children in the Holyoke public school system, so I'm excited about this. So here I am.
My name is Mark Limbold. I'm a mechanical engineer. I run a small family business here in Holyoke. We help companies automate. We design packaging equipment to help them do that. I have a junior in college and a junior at Holyoke High School. I also coach at Holyoke High School football team. Go Knights! And I'm looking forward to working with everyone here and coming up with a great plan for the future.
I'm Bill Collimore, member of the school committee, and I was chairman of the school building committee when they redone Hoyoke High School, and I was also on the committee that started the junior high school building committee. I've been lived in Hoyoke all my life and continue to support anything that's good for the children of Hoyoke.
I'm Will Playo. I'm running for City Council for Ward 2, the mayor's ward, so I got some big shoes to fill there. I grew up in the city. I learned to speak English at McHugh. I went to Lawrence, Lynch, Peck, Holyoke High. Then I joined the world's greatest Air Force. I've been in the Air Force for 8 years, and I'm really looking forward to being part of this process. Thanks a lot.
And if I can just add, he is going to be the city council representative. I knew he was winning. I was pretty sure he was going to win, so, and I needed to get a city council on him. So
He's running a bigger campaign.
I asked him and he said he would, so.
All right, I'm Dave Yost. I own a very small business pretty much across the street from here. I've been a Holyoke resident since 1998. Both my daughters went through the system from start to finish, graduated from high school. And my oldest grandson is now a second grader at Metcalf, and I look forward, as the mayor mentioned, to make sure that we bring the financial piece into this process.
Hello, my name is Jessica Perella. I am a parent of 4 HBS children. Currently, they're all in elementary school, and I am excited and grateful for the opportunity to be part of this process. And part of what motivated me to be here is what's next for our children as a whole. So I'm currently a student in UMass Amherst, and I'm finishing my bachelor's degree in community development.
So on behalf of this community, I want to thank you all for stepping up, for being willing to put up, and obviously we told you the time commitment is pretty significant. It's long-standing. I'm going to ask timeframes that we have to go through, when we might expect to have to go to the MSBA. So you get a better idea of that. When we might know that we're actually being approved and for how much. And then ultimately, the next mayor, assuming they agree with that, would issue a bond. The city council would then have to approve the bond by 2/3 vote. And if all that happened, the goal, as and Anthony, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that we would have a new school either in the fall of 25 or the spring of 26. And as Anthony knows, I strongly encourage the fall of 25, so you start the new year with everything in place. Anthony?
So right now, we are in what's called the eligibility period. And this is a pretty big milestone right now. It was appointing the building committee, so I want to thank the mayor and for getting so many different people on this board interested. I want to thank all of you for your interest in the project. It's something that's really needed for our students. The last time that this didn't actually go through, obviously was not our students' fault. And I hope that together we can work and make this possible for our students. On October 1st was when we had to have the school building committee appointed, so we've already done that. And then the next milestone is going to be November 1st. We have to submit an educational profile and our online enrollment projections. We are working with an outside consultant and a middle school collaborative team to develop that profile, and that's one of the groups that I would love to have come speak to the committee. They are designing what a middle school experience should look like. They've done a lot of empathy interviews with a lot of members of the community, a lot of staff, and they're designing what educational profile for middle school should look like. Then in January, we have to certify our enrollment. The biggest thing is there will be a local vote required on April 29th, and we'll have to have a feasibility study agreement on April 29th. And then at that point, after that, we will know whether or not the MSBA is moving us forward into the feasibility period. And when that happens, once we go through the feasibility study, we'll have an OPM, and that OPM will help us develop a much tighter timeline around how things are going to progress moving beyond April 29th.
Anthony, if I may, just to caution you with the abbreviations, because a lot of people might not know what the abbreviations stand for at this juncture.
Are you referring to the MSBA?
Well, no, I know what that means, but some people might not. So just abbreviation, not every, So yes, in others, just because some people might not know the abbreviations that you use.
So yeah, I think the one thing I abbreviated was MSBA. That's the Massachusetts School Building Authority. But if I missed anything, please let me know, and I'll be cautious of that moving forward.
And I also want to recognize we have Ward 2 and Ward 1 school committee women, Rosalie Pensley Williams and Elizabeth Davis. Thank you both for coming. I appreciate that. If I can just ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to kind of open up here for any other questions. The April 29th, when you say a local vote, is that a committee vote or is that a vote that never to be able?
That's got to be a vote from the city council.
On the city council, on
by April 29th.
To do what?
For the feasibility study.
Okay. And so some of the other things that we've been discussing, and we've been having meetings for probably about 4 or 5 months, on Thursdays with MSBA in the morning. Some of the things that they've talked about, and some of the things you have to decide. Location is one. It appears that there's a strong inclination to make it at Peck, to figure out that that's where it's going to be. I'm assuming that would have to end up being a formal board at some point. There's also whether or not we use the same designers, architects, planners, suggested that we look at some model schools, just to see if any of those model schools actually meet our needs. And if so, might that reduce our costs? And again, those are the kind of things you're going to have to balance. The design, the academics versus the cost are all things you're going to have to work with. Some of the other things, and this is, and I know if it's at Peck, and I know they're working on it, is are we able to take all the students that are at Peck now? If we remove Peck from our inventory while we're building a new one, where are those students going? We need to make sure that that plan is in place, and I know they're working on that. I know 2 years ago when I asked that question, Dr. Reich had indicated he thought some of those students would have to go out of city, and I would, for one, would strongly encourage that whatever we do, we have a plan that keeps all of our kids in Hoyok. And I know that's what Anthony Soto is working on with his staff. But that is something you want to make sure that that is what happens. And then you got choices on curriculum. I mean, those are going to be some tough choices. What curriculums do we put in there? We can have a great building, but we still got to know what we want to put in there. And we've got some great programs. We got the STEM program, we got dual language, we got other programs. So what do we put there, and what's going to have the maximum benefit for those kids? What's going to give them the best chance for a solid education? Universally throughout the city, not just the kids going to that school, because not everybody's going to be going to that school. So those are some decisions that have to be considered and have to be planned for and discussed. And I would be willing to bet probably have some compromises that have to be made. And those are not going to be easy decisions. I mean, I've already had people tell me it should be this, and I'm talking to people on the street, not you people. Tell me it should be this or it should be that. You know, and they have a vested interest, but we got to make sure we do what's best for all of the students. And in some cases, that may not be getting that program into that new school. It may be keeping that program here and bringing something else. And let me just, Joshua, if you don't mind, Joshua Garcia is now in the back. I just want to thank you for coming, appreciate it. So, those are things that I wanted to just kind of get out in front of you all, so that you have an idea what the time frame is. I would venture the first month or two, the meetings will not be as intense as you go along, and as more information comes out and more discussions and decisions have to be made, we need to get more involved. The other aspect is to the working groups, my expectation, so if we're meeting October 14th with this group, my expectation is the working groups will probably meet somewhere around October 21st or October 28th before the next full school building meeting, and start to think about it. All right, what are our financial capacities? What academic programs do we want, and how do we want to get them? So I want to open it up for discussion. Questions, thoughts, comments? Yes.
You mentioned earlier about meeting with the state, and PEC has come up. Is the state pushing the PEC site, or is the city?
I can answer that. The application that we submitted to the MSBA is called a statement of interest. And that statement of interest, we asked them to study PEC as a site. So PEC is the site that they're going to be studying as in the feasibility study. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's where construction is going to happen. But that is, they're going to be studying our PEC school, the students that are there, the grade scales that are there, and that's, you know, that was us. When we did this a couple of years ago, we were looking at PEC and Lawrence site, and when we submitted the statement of interest, it was one site. I believe it was PEC, and what ended up resulting after the feasibility study went through was a proposal to do 2 schools at PEC and Lawrence. But when you submit a statement of interest, you have to pick a school that you want them to study.
Thank you.
Yes.
I will pose to everybody's consideration that we can work more effectively, and that doesn't have to be done tonight, but maybe the department can do it for us. If we are clear on what is it that the committee is being convened for, and what I mean by that is, are there some non-negotiables, non-movables, the type of which, if we discuss ad nauseum, we will be wasting energy and time? And what exactly are the areas of input for committee? For example, if the suggestion that location, current design versus a new design, the localization of PEC students, curriculum is agreeable that those are areas of input, we would like to know. And we will work with whatever area of input is necessary or not. What is the role of the consultant as opposed to committee? And at the end, maybe even a timeline in which the feasibility and the viability steps are there, but also a timeline that says school council approves the vote, yes, therefore, then no, therefore what, and so on and so forth. I mean, again, we will work in whatever. It is clear to know what are the negotiables and what are the areas of input, and we'll do the work from there.
I would tell you just from my perspective, the only, everything is negotiable, except I don't think we can do it outside the city's regular taxing structure. I think if we go beyond that, then we're going to be back fighting another battle that we don't. I think people are trusting that we have gone to our bond council, and our bond council has said you can afford one school, and this is how you can do it, and this is how the impact goes for the 25 to 30 years. And this is where you're able to do it. So, I mean, I will say in the next year or two, based on what happens financially, that could change to be better. It could change to be worse. But that's one of the reasons I think there's got to be a finance working group that continues to see where are we financially. Because ultimately, that's, to me, that's the only non-negotiable area. We have got to be able to afford it. If we can afford it and build a Taj Mahal, then we should build a Taj Mahal. But that is the key. And then the other aspect, in terms of parental involvement, if you will, I mean, obviously, we have parents that want their children in this program or that program or that program, and that's great. But they can't all be, we can't have, I won't say can't. Should we have all of one program in that new school? And then what about all the other kids? Or should we have some kind of balance? I don't know the answer, but those are things that I think have to be discussed. If we were to try to put a balance, let's say we were going to put 200 students in dual language, 200 students in STEM, 200 students in general studies or whatever, what would that have? What kind of impact would that have on the quality of education? Would that lessen the quality of education? And if that is the case, then that's not a good scenario. So those are the kind of discussions I think we have to have. And I certainly don't have the answers, but I think those are questions that have to be discussed. And those are, you know, when I said compromise, sometimes you got to take it out. It's not necessarily only for my kid. It's for all the kids. How do we make it good for all the kids? And how do we get to there? I mean, I've told some of you during the interview, if we only put the programs that have the most popularity there, what about the kids that are going to not in those programs? Would a new school help those kids that are not in those programs attend school more often and have more enthusiasm in school? And if that's the case, does that not improve our school educational environment throughout the city? Those are all questions. Those are all discussions. There are no limits other than the money.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I believe that you will understand that when I say finance and those type of things, everything else is large. And you answer the question very well. But I'm asking the question from the receiver, because I've been in those shoes. Time keeps on running and they're working. So what type of work we will find out that we have to review because it's being duplicated. Because he's not going to wait until the committee gets the act together and those all kinds of recommendations. I mean, I'm thinking eventually the school committee will be a policy committee. What type of things that are policies should be very careful when we do input, because they belong to a hyper policy type of organization. Maybe I'm making it very complicated. All I'm saying is I'm willing to work on anything. The clearer we are on what is it that you want the most input in, the better the input will be.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that as the process goes along and we work with, if we get into the feasibility study and we work with our project manager, they're going to be real clear on here are some of the decisions that the building committee has to vote on and move forward. We do work, we try to keep the school committee in the loop regularly. As you can see, some of them are here today. I think one of the biggest questions that I'm hearing right now is like what programs might be going in there. So we do have a dual language middle school program. We do have a STEM middle school program. We have Veritas operating one of our middle schools over at Peck, and then we have a Strand program at Peck as well. So there are a lot of different middle school programs that exist in Holyoke, and we are working with the middle school collaborative to really narrow down what it is that we want to provide in terms of a middle school experience for our kids. And hopefully they will be able to come to this committee, to the building committee, and lay out what all those options are. We got to talk about grade span. So do we do a middle school 6 to 8? Do we do a middle school of 5 to 8? And not just looking at the building itself. The study that's being conducted right now is looking at middle schools for all of Holyoke. So if we do get a new building, we still got to think about the other 550 middle school students and what that middle school experience is going to be.
I was just going to mention the committee that's working on the middle school programming right now that Jackie and I both sit on. And so that working group is heavily focused on building what we want the middle school experience for every student in Holyoke to look like. And so I think it's really important that at some point, maybe we can have the keynote people from that group come and do a presentation here, because I believe it's not really up to this group to decide what we want the middle school experience in Holyoke to look like. We're working on that with experts in the field who know what it should look like, right? So then one of the main things we're going to just have to figure out is, based on their recommendations, which programs ultimately that Holyoke as a whole decides to move forward with end up in this building versus other buildings. But I think it's important to keep in mind equity, right? We talk about equity across the city, and we need to make sure that a student that doesn't get in this new building is still allowed all the opportunities as those students. Maybe not, because obviously every program can't be there. So if you choose STEM and it's not in that building, obviously you're not going to get the same exact experience. But I mean, as far as intramural sports, math curricula, standards and practices, what we expect out of students. So that's something that the middle school working group is going to work on as a whole for that middle school experience in Holyoke. And one of the things, like Mr. Soto mentioned, that's being worked on as well is to determine what grades we want middle school to be in Holyoke. So, when I hear a lot about the curriculum, it's, we're not going to be deciding what our students are learning per se, but we'll have to ultimately decide what programs go into the new space versus the older space.
I thought it would be someone from this committee would be the chairman, but it'll be the,
No,
it'll be the mayor.
It's that's my understanding. That's what the potential intention is. And I've said I'll step into it, and I'm looking at the two, and I'm assuming they probably would do that as well. And I will also say, I think it's important that whether they be the chair or not, and I'm going to emphasize it again, they need to be the lead, because ultimately it's their decision, do they put the money up front or not. And if they are not buying in, or if they are not buying in and leading the community towards that decision, that creates a negative that we don't want. And that's just my opinion. And obviously in 40 days, there'll be a new chair. Mark?
Just the working groups, will there be meeting spaces, and do minutes need to be taken, and logistically, what are some of those type of things?
Yeah, we're working on the logistics of open meeting law. Because, and there's some questions there, so we're still trying to figure that out, but because the working groups are informal, if you will, and don't have a formal vote, but are more for input and information purposes, there's some question as to whether or not they have to have an open meeting. I would suggest in terms of space, yeah, whether it's here, not here, obviously. I mean, I can put you in the city council, tax collector, former tax collector room. We can definitely make space. The question is, do we need to have open meeting law requirements? And if we do, I'll find that out, and we'll make sure we know that by October 14th. So and it's a good question. I want to make sure we're not violating any laws. That's all we need to do is start this process and then find out everything you did is illegal. That's not the way to go. But I will definitely find out about that. Right now, it's only this full building committee that I've been told has open meeting requirements, because you have voting authority. So I'll get a clarification, and it's still just being looked at. Other thoughts, other comments, suggestions?
Just a remark about the committees. Terry, being Mayor Murphy, you said academic, finance, and extracurricular. Was there another one? I was trying to keep up with my own.
Design, the construction design. I think those three have got to work together. I mean, and when I think about costs, and I think about what is in the school, obviously certain things cost more. If it's a heavily scientific middle school with new scientific equipment, I would think there's a greater cost. I'm not saying we don't want new scientific equipment, but I would think the STEM, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously you know STEM stuff far better than I, but I would think a STEM academy would have heavier scientific instrument costs. Potential. You're not sure either.
I'm not sure to answer that.
Okay.
If we were to focus on a STEM-based type middle school, then yes, of course. I think for the committee, I think it's fair to say, we're called STEM Academy. STEM Academy was created 4 years ago, and it was called STEM Academy before it was a STEM school. So it's a traditional middle school. We are trying to focus ourselves on STEM, and that's helped us with a huge grant from Verizon, where we have iPads, and we've created 2 courses at STEM called STEM, which there's a STEM 1 and a STEM 2, which introduce the kids to basic computing, coding, and these things, and then we get into engineering and the like. So we are creating the programs as we go. So my take on this is, if we're going to create a robust middle school experience, I think if we're going to talk not even extracurricular activities, but academic activities, we expand on the specials or the specials or exploratory classes, depending on what you call them. And you can incorporate STEM into a traditional middle school, and I believe you can probably, not knowing exactly, you could probably incorporate dual language as well in some way, shape, or form. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think we look at robust middle school experience.
And I think those are valid comments. And again, you are in that position to review it. Ultimately, you're going to agree to the design of the school. You're going to agree to the cost, and obviously, you're going to have a idea, this is what we're looking to have in there. And I know when the design came out for the two schools, you know, there were specific things, we're having this in this area, this in this area, and trying to make the connection. So, I mean, I think you're gonna do the same thing with just one school, and you know, there'll be some discussion, and I think, Committeewoman Brunel's point that we need to make sure that every middle school student ends up getting a good education, getting the best education that they possibly can. Not a good, the best education they possibly can, is important. So as you go through that, we also want to look at, all right, what else are we doing to make sure those other students are getting a quality education? Other thoughts?
I feel that maybe I was misunderstood and maybe I'm a little bit confused. Our role is advisory. When you say we will vote and whatever, I understand that this is a district in a receivership and there are some governmental issues here that cannot be delegated to a committee. So I was precisely talking about that. Could we have, really from the get-go, an understanding that we can work with the school department telling us this is what we have done so far and this is what we are thinking, so that we can give input, so that we can say, I'm sure you want to do it like that, I'm sure you want to present it like that, and hopefully get to a point in which whether the receiver or the school committee say, we are recommending this, and the design committee supports this idea. That's what I'm trying to say, because if we think that we're going to come here and work on all these issues while there are professionals working on them, and while there are other members of the community that have the fiduciary and also the responsibility, the legal responsibility of making those decisions, then what we're going to do is just turn our wheels without being very...
I'm pretty sure Anthony's going to provide you with his and his cabinet are going to provide you with a significant amount of input into the various options that are available. But ultimately, you got to decide, because one option may end up costing $3 million more than another, and you got to figure out, does that fit into the design and does that fit into the financial capacity? I mean, the information, you're not coming out and making this decision without input. You're going to get plenty of input from them, and they'll guide you through the process. But ultimately, you've got to make a decision. If we do this, and we provide this, are we able to afford it? And if not, what can we cut in order to make it so that we get a good education, a good building, but are within the capacity for that mayor to issue a bond and for the city council to pass that. So input from administrators, input from school committee members, obviously those are, and from other professional educators are all part of this process. Input from the team that might be the architectural designers is going to be part of the process. It's not you're taking this out of thin air and just you're going to go make it. You're going to have all that input, but ultimately it's still coming back to this committee to review it and have a vote. This is what we want to do. This is where we're going. And then that vote, as I understand it, would go to the MSBA saying, okay, we've got these approvals. This is what we're looking to do. This is how much we can afford. And we're good at doing this right now. And then the MSBA says, okay, we like what you've done. We like what you've designed. We like your financial plan. We want you to move forward and let's go get a new school. And that's ultimately the goal. And I have very few people in the community who have told me they do not think we need a new school. Just so you're up front, almost everybody that I've talked to has said if we can afford it, we should build it. And I think that's, obviously it's not 100%, but I'll bet you it's very high up there in the low 90s of community support, as long as we do it financially within our capacity. But everything, you're going to get information every meeting. Most of the meetings they'll be coming with, and we'll talk about it before we go to the meeting, you know, we want to bring these kind of things up. We want to bring up what's the middle school plan that we're working on. What's the long-term middle school plan? What's the middle school plan if we build a new school? And then try to work from there. Do we want to go to, you know, state has suggested, what, 3 or 4 model schools? I think that's what they were saying at one of those meetings.
Yeah, there was a couple they wanted us to look at. Yeah.
You know, so do several of us go to look at a model school for design or for how we think it would impact academically or to find out what it would impact financially? I mean, those are things that are going to come out as we move along the process.
And I think there's going to be things that the committee has to vote on to move forward, like anything moving forward to the city council itself. This body will have to vote to move it forward to the city council. And there's going to be things that we talk about that we're just looking for input, you know, that doesn't require a vote. But ultimately, this committee, its mission is to get the building, move the MSBA project forward so that we can get a new middle school for our students.
Mr. Murphy, do we have somebody taking minutes?
No, we do not.
It's being recorded.
It is being recorded.
We should consider that moving forward and either appointing somebody to do it within the committee or I don't know if our admin can do it or somebody's admin, but we should probably have written minutes too.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be to record it. Would that suffice as minutes if we record it and have it scripted?
I mean, we record school committee meetings, but we still have minutes.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference, but I mean.
But if we record it and then after the recording, you have someone write up the minutes or the summary of what's going on. You're not talking word for word, right?
I'm sorry?
You're not talking word for word. All right.
I mean, are minutes word for word or are they a synopsis of a talking point? You know, I don't think they're word for word, but I think it's important to have minutes.
Okay. Council Sullivan?
Yep.
And I'm actually going to give it to your candidate for safety. Go ahead.
Thank you. On the last school building committee, I was the council rep. And one thing I'd like to make, and I see some familiar faces from the last go around, and one of the biggest stumbling blocks the last time around, both for the general public and for the city council and a lot of other people involved, was understanding the state formula. And I think it's real important that everybody understand that right out of the starting gate so we can effectively communicate this and there's no stumbling and there's clear understanding to the public. And you have the state formula, which is 80% of a square foot price and then certain items down the list of what comprises a new middle school. And that was the big stumbling block in understanding that square foot price is where the 80% is. So if you have a school with a square foot price of $500, right? And I'm just throwing numbers, these aren't the exact numbers. And the state is allowing 80% of a price of $400. It lowers your effective reimbursement rate. So yes, they're giving you 80% of their set square foot price. And that was a tough thing for everybody to get their head around. There was a lot of confusion around that. And then people say, well, we're really only getting 55% or 59%. Well, we're not being treated fairly. That is the same number for every city and town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They set a square foot price on a model school that they come up with. And if you go beyond that number, it brings your effective rate down. And that was a big confusion in the public and even in the city council, was the difference between that 80% and what the real effective rate was based on that square foot price, and then the other things that come out that aren't eligible.
And I would just want to caution everybody, keep that in mind, because that was the biggest controversy and the biggest stumbling block in the entire last process.
Mr. Garcia, you want to offer any thoughts?
Path you're laying forward here tonight. In this process, I know that it's going to be a relatively long and complex process, but nevertheless, I think that with the leadership you have currently and the folks that are around the table tonight, I'm confident that you can reach your end goal. I think we all know and agree that certainly we need to offer an opportunity here, a better opportunity for the middle school environment. Certainly I've heard some folks already raise some possible concerns, but nevertheless through effective communication and folks collaborating, working together, I have no doubt that you'll certainly be able to navigate those and come to a relatively solid conclusion that's within the budget parameters of what the city can maintain, which is the other concern that we've learned also since this conversation first started. But I didn't want to offer anything more than that, because certainly I'm in a place of ignorance right now. I'm learning too. But I really certainly do appreciate the invitation and being here and listening to what you guys have to say. So, thank you.
Councilor Folden thought maybe we can have somebody from the MSBA come in to, explain to us about the whole reimbursement system, maybe after we've had time to formulate some questions that we want to ask.
I will say, the last time around, we did have Jack McCarthy come out, and he's in charge of the executive director of the MSBA, and he did present to the city council that, everything about the formula. But Councilor Sullivan is right. We can't go into this process thinking that we're going to get full 80% reimbursement, because we'll end up disappointing ourselves. The biggest contributing factor to that is the cap on square footage with construction costs. So we do get the 80%, but it's of eligible costs, and anything above, the minimum square or the maximum square footage, that's where we end up paying a little more than we end up paying. We end up not getting the 80% because of that.
Yeah, just say we want to understand the final points. There are some costs that are eligible over his arms. Really get into the details of that.
I mean, it is a valid point. I mean, we're not getting 80%, so we'll try to make that as clear as possible. But we want to try to get as close to that as possible, and that's where we want to make sure we provide the academic, but that's where the building design has to play a role with it. We might be able to get the same academic performance and not have to do certain things in the design. And if that's the case, then that potentially increases our percentage of state reimbursement, which makes it more financially palatable to maybe do some other things. So those are the kind of discussions I'm talking that you will have as you go through this process, and as you're looking. And I would say, MSBA is definitely behind this. They want us to succeed in getting this done. There's no question in my mind. Every comment that they brought to our meetings, every comment they brought when I've had conversations with them when we were reviewing the last meeting, they made it very clear to me that they want to support at least a school in a way, and they obviously want to support more than one. Yes, Rose.
What is the deadline for all of this? How much time are they giving us to have this done?
There's a vote on April 29th for a feasibility study.
Yeah, April 29th. That's the biggest. So we have to have a head plan. I mentioned it earlier. Let me find it again.
Terry, if I may, I was communicating with Devin. He was a school board member that sat on this committee through the last process. And I think we should insist on having formal minutes taken. He said that was the main documents that we were submitting to the MSBA. So I definitely think moving forward, we do need to have formal minutes taken and approved at the following meeting.
Yeah, so November 1st is when the educational profile has to be submitted. That's one of the deadlines we're gonna have to meet. And then April 29th is when we have to have a vote from the committee on the feasibility study. For the feasibility study.
So I'll work with Anthony and his staff to try to make sure at the October 14th meeting, we've got all the information you need so that the November 1st, we've got all that information ahead of time and be able to act on that so that we're not missing that day. And I just talked to him about getting someone to keep minutes. And he didn't say yes, so, you know. But I think he was thinking he might. I did put it down and we'll work on it again.
City Hall has administrative staff too.
One more time.
The City Hall has administrative staff as well.
It's not going to be administrative staff, it's going to be able to take care of that. So keep that in mind. Any other thoughts or questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yep.
This is just to clarify the role of the working subgroup versus the whole group.
Yep.
So I see there's a board listed of the voting members and then a list of the working subgroup members, which I'm a member. So are we expected as working subgroup members to be at the full committee meeting?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And are we a part of the voting body or no?
No, there had to be a specific voting body.
Yep.
And then, but the working groups are, first of all, I want you to be here whenever you want to, because obviously that provides you information that you can further discuss when you are in your working groups. So if you're on a working group and not on the full school building committee, yes, you are. I encourage you to come so that you get as much information as you can. But you are not allowed to have a vote according to the way it had to be derived.
Okay.
But yes, you're definitely invited, and you're willing, at least while I'm here, I want ideas, thoughts, concerns, questions, asked and answered as much as we can.
Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you.
I have one more question.
Yep.
The input sessions that we discussed for outside resources will be coming to us with their input. Will that be happening more in the full committee meetings or more in the working groups or both?
It could be both. I think it'll start in the full group so that everybody gets more comfortable with the process. And then as you do that, you may also say, can I get them to come in? We need to have a little more depth on what they're talking about there. I sort of like it, but I'm not really sure that this is where we want to go, but I'd like to know the pros and cons of that, and we could bring them back into the discussion.
Additionally, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Additionally, will you be assigning the people to the different categories of the working subgroups, or would you like us to gravitate toward the subgroups that we feel we have the most expertise?
Yeah, I kind of thought you all would go to the areas that you kind of indicated during the interviews. And as I did that, I kind of thought, okay, 6 or 7 people in that one, 5 or 6 in this one, 4 or 5 in that one. I ended up with pretty much everybody covered.
Yep.
And I would ask, I'll use Mark as an example. When we get into design, I would have Mark kind of lead the work group, because obviously he's got the engineering experience. He's going to be able to look at things from that perspective. Not that, and from a financial perspective, I might look at Raina or David or others, but I mean, it varies. But I think I want it small enough, 6 or 7 people, so that you really get a chance to just talk about, and you may only have one issue for the night, or you may have multiple, and then you're going to come back to the full meeting, the next one, and say, we discussed this, these are things that we think we should continue to look at, these are things where we think maybe you aren't going to be able to fit, and then that goes for discussion, and then we keep coming back to it. I mean, I think you're gonna have a dialogue that keeps going back and forth. I don't think you're gonna have, okay, this is one straight line, and this is exactly how we do it. I think we're going this way, but you know what, maybe we gotta veer off here. And dialogue and communication and respect for the difference of opinion, I think you're gonna get to the right spot.
And sorry, all the logistics questions, but will there be a chair of the subgroups that will be determining when they meet, or how are the meetings for the subgroups determined?
Yeah, I think we'll decide that at the next meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Again, I just wanted to get everybody, you know, I was kind of on that October 1st deadline, trying to just make sure we got you out here ready to work together and get to know each other. And then after that, like I said, I would think probably in the 7 to 10 days after the 14th, you'll meet again, and then potentially just before the mayor election, you might meet one more time. And then whoever gets elected mayor, I'm sure will probably meet with you pretty soon right after that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. Okay, so, yes?
Is there gonna be a location where all the data is gonna be stored, and studies, procedures that we'll all have access to?
Yeah, there will be.
And as we go along, there'll be more information that's being shared as we go along. As we start to collect data, we start to get information, one thing we'll do is try to share the letter from our bond council about the financial impacts and how they feel it would fit in. I think that's something you want to see. I think certainly looking at the last two school designs and the construction of those designs and what the plans were, you should at least be able to look at those and say, this is what they were looking at last time. Would we still want to do that this time? Maybe, maybe not. But there's gonna be thoughts and questions as we go along to kind of find the right path. Okay. So, again, I want to thank all of you for stepping up. You've got a challenge, but you've got a challenge that I think the community wants to support you on. You've got a challenge that can make a difference, not in just 550 kids' lives, but hopefully in 5,000 kids' lives, and on and on and on. So I encourage you, I certainly want this committee to be successful. I want this process to move forward. I want it to be very public. I don't want us to meet and not have the public knowing what's going on. I think it's very important that they understand that we are looking at all of that. And if they do, and they know you're looking at that circle, they know you're trying to do what Hoyoke needs, but also what Hoyoke can afford. And if you do that, again, I've heard very, very few negative comments about our new school, as long as it's within our financial capacity. And the only questions I've heard is what curriculum, what do we put there? And that's the only debate I continue to hear. And I do hear that debate quite frequently. So, we're looking back here, October 14th, 6 o'clock. If you have, obviously, if you have questions, concerns, you want to offer comments and suggestions, and you want to let me know ahead of time, obviously, we can schedule a meeting with me, you can send me an email, you can call me, and I'll try to make sure that we get the word out as much as we can. I'm going to be working with Anthony and his team to make sure we have an agenda for the next meeting that's more in-depth, but also has some additional historical information and also potentially future information so that you have a little bit more data to work with as you move forward. All right, so thank you very much. Have a safe evening. Thank you for asking